Hello, Eric.
Hey, Suzanne.
Cloudy day.
Yeah, it's kind of. I think it was on Saturday. I think it was either Friday or Sunday. One day last week. It was very nice, and I thought, oh, maybe summer's coming. And then the next day, it just like poured rain all day. So alas, it's still highly okay.
Yeah.
So I kind of rabbit holed a little bit. Um, so I know last time I talked about how we were going to do the dynamic config. Um, and I started spitballing that, and then I got pulled into three other things, and then um, kind of like felt out this other thing that is necessary. So I actually did get an implementation of that though, so we can just look at it. It wasn't that much work, so if we can just look at that and decide if that's cool or not. I think it's cool, but who knows?
Is that um I took a 2-second look. Is that to allow the pass through option?
Yeah. So that'll essentially let a gatekeeper look at everything. Um, so that does two things. It adds pass through as an option, which makes sure that regardless of what the policy says, it runs through every possible verifier. And then the other thing it does is actually exposes the results of each verifier to gatekeeper. And the third thing it does is adds an extra field called extensions to the verifier result, so that in addition to like a Boolean and a basic message, verifiers could add arbitrary um, structured data to the response, so that I'll show the example when we go through. But my example shows that like if you have a certificate, like let's say you're concerned with an image being signed with a certain key, then you would be able to look at that, or you'd be able to write a policy for that, because we could extract things like the organization unit or the issuer, like the subject or the common name from the certificate, and we could append that to the results of the signature validation. So
Yeah, we'll go through as example when we review that. So let me share screen. Once I start sharing my screen, I don't have a good view of who's in the lobby. So let me know if you see if there are people waiting.
oh, in the waiting room,
Yeah.
I don't know if I
Would we
can.
see that?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't know if we can even see that.
Oh, sometimes when I share screen, like the thing pops up and everybody sees it. Have you seen that before? It's once I share screen, I think it'll pop up on my screen. And because I'm sharing screen, and it only disappears, like it shows for like 2 seconds. So in the past, like I've had Sajay pinging me on the side, have you started the meeting? Because I didn't see that little pop up.
Oh, yeah. Somebody who reached out to me actually is attempting to join. Let's see. So I'll see.
Who is that? Is it the
Lee.
person who, yeah, I saw his PR on the adding the service account
Yeah.
earlier.
Yeah. So let's see. That's it.
Yeah, I also commented on his pull request saying if you would like to join us at the community meeting, but I forgot to provide him with the link.
Is our meeting is open to the meeting invite is open to anyone, right?
Yes, it's a public Google Calendar invite, but you have to be a Zoom user you have to be signed in to join the meeting.
Okay, so you do have to have a Zoom account.
I believe so.
Okay.
Yeah, because it makes me log in.
Okay, so Lee was pinging me, so I was just letting him know that I think you have to be logged into a Zoom account.
Yep, thanks. Yeah, while you do that, we'll go through the some pending reviews from last week. So the first one we had a review policy from last week. I think everybody signed off on it. I know Sajay wanted some maintainers from other communities to take a look, and I think like we just kind of commented in other PRs from other repos like, hey, can you take a look at this as well? But we haven't heard any response. Are we happy just to merge this for now? And once they get to this, they can add more feedback.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, no objections. I will go ahead and merge this.
Yeah, looks good for me.
Okay, that's merged. And we had an item to configure dependent bot for Ratify. I know, Eric, you've signed off on this PR, but Sajay left a comment about if this needs to be manually rebased and squashed to update the branch. Do you know what he means by that?
Plan to use this PR. No, we might have to reach out to him. I'm not quite sure what he's, unless he's just referring to the fact that we're enabling Dependabot while accepting essentially all of the existing changes, then maybe he's talking like, about that.
We want to track it differently, like as in not combine into one commit.
Yeah, or either that or he's referring to Akash's comment above about the. Oh, so we can ask.
Yeah. Hi, Sajay.
Hello.
Hi. We're just going through the pending PRs, and we're just talking about one of the dependent bot PR. And you said we might need to manually rebase and squash. Can you clarify? Like, do you mean if we want to track the YAML file as separate commit to the dependency update?
Can you just look at the commit history on top, scroll up and.
Yep.
So it's showing a bunch of commits to this one, right?
Yeah. So what happened is I enabled the workflow on my main branch from my fork. So then Dependabot like created all the separate PRs one at a time. And I took them in, I merged these and then did a combined validation because I don't want to validate one dependency.
No, that's fine. That's totally fine. All I'm maybe suggesting is, do you want to just go ahead and squash all the commits together and just make one commit?
Yeah. That's what I intend to do. Like, so if I do squash and merge, it'll go in as one commit.
Yeah, that's all.
Yeah. Okay, then I'll merge this now.
Yeah, sure. Go for it.
Yeah, and now we'll receive new PRs. The default limit is 5 at a time. So we'll see some come in. Yeah.
Hopefully it doesn't get nuttier than 5 at a time. That will.
Yeah, on the initial configuration, I think we got like 9. So I resolved 5, and then the next batch came, but then it only came in 4. So I'm like, oh, maybe we're only at 9 since it did not create 5 at a time.
I guess we'll have to see how it goes. But
yeah,
I've seen like dozens of those. Like you get like one library that's too deep, and then like 50 projects have to bump.
Okay, I will look forward to that. Hello, Lee. Welcome to
Sorry,
the
I'm not used to Zoom. Had to find the unmute. Hello, I have 2 team members who are also trying to join this call. They may or may not be successful. I was hoping to do introductions with them around, but just for some context, myself and then 2 team members, Kara McLaughlin and Yomi Lajide, we're both in CSE in Microsoft. We're all in CSE in Microsoft, and we're working on a secure supply chain scenario, looking at customer needs around this. So we've been starting to play with Ratify. So there's this PR, but also we were hoping to talk to y'all about some further contributions down the road and working more heavily with y'all for a bit to get Ratify up to a point that it fits with our end-to-end scenario. Looks like Kara's about to join the meeting. I think she's waiting to be let in.
Oh, let me look at the list. Yes, sorry, I missed the pop-up. Just like I was talking to Eric about, like sometimes I don't see the pop-up.
No worries. But yeah, I'm happy to talk over this PR. I don't really know what your standard workflow is, so I don't know if you've generally been going over PRs in these meetings or just async whenever. But it looks like you've already reviewed a bit and I haven't even got back to that, so I may need to catch up.
Yeah, first of all, welcome. Go ahead, Sajay. You had your hand raised before.
Yeah, no, welcome. Lee and Kara is there's no structure to how we kind of review the PRs. If you want to talk about it, that would be great. Then we kind of get to know what the PR is about, and I think if you can just get an overview, that would definitely kind of set some context as to and what the end-to-end that you're trying to achieve also, so that everybody has some context.
Sure. I will, just to talk to the PR very briefly. We were setting up Ratify with Azure Workload Identity. It runs into some issues with the help chart where the service account name isn't referenced properly. So this sorts out that issue, but also plumbs through a service account for Azure Workload Identity fully into the Helm chart. So if someone's using Azure Workload Identity and they pass in the client ID, it should create the service account needed for that. I sort of was playing with the existing Helm chart template for service account name. So I put back in some of the there's usually in the values file service account.create and service account.name that are just sort of default Helm values. So I put those back in to enable use down the road. But otherwise, it should be pretty straightforward for Azure Workload Identity support. And Kara may want to talk more to our end-to-end scenario and what we're trying to get done.
At a base level, we're just trying to be able to have an end-to-end sample that we can share with customers and to show how to secure your software supply chain from build to deploy to AKS. Specifically, we are currently targeting the Microsoft first products. So that is a limit, but yeah, that's a high level. But it includes SBOM signing, vulnerability scanning, the whole gambit.
That's really cool. So just to ask a few more questions. This is from a workflow perspective, when somebody does a deployment using any image, the idea is to kind of check if it has an SBOM, if it has a signature and so forth, right? And the basic PR right now is probably a set of bugs when we use workload identity, I'm guessing, or maybe enabling that scenario. Is there, or does that kind of like summarize, or is there more context to this?
This is so that we can start getting our scenario sample working. So okay. This PR is purely just, bug fix that first piece.
That's great. I think we should just get it in if it fixes anything.
I was super excited to see this issue because I was like, oh, someone is using it. So thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, we're going to be working.
Lee, I think you just went on mute accidentally.
I'm sorry, I'm so accustomed to Teams. But yeah, we're using it in advance of playing with it with some customers. And also having just looked at your review there, you're absolutely right. Those should probably be combined. I wasn't super familiar with the key vault stuff there, so I had been mostly ignoring it, but that would change my implementation and I can make those changes and put it in. So I wouldn't merge it just yet, but that would be a good change to make sure that the key vault stuff plays equally nicely.
Yeah, thanks. I'm also pretty new to the Helm charts. Eric probably have more context. Eric, would you mind having a quick look on the change as well?
Yeah. I'll take a look at the PR. I should have gotten around to leaving the comment, but that was going to be my only comment from your original issue post, was that the workload identity is dual purpose or can be dual purpose. So making sure that it plays nice.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I can definitely update to include that.
And I don't know if it is relevant here, but we'll also have to consider the possibility that we're going to need to juggle multiple identities potentially, or multiple sets of credentials. So whatever we do, I guess in the near term, we could probably just make this change. So maybe that's not relevant here, actually. Well, we can worry about that later.
I do think you might, like, I think the service account name field in a deployment spec is just for one service account. So you might run into some issues there down the line. I don't know if there's standard workarounds for that for Azure Workload ID yet.
Yeah. We'll have some future problems to solve.
Cool. It's great to have more eyes on this. Lee and Kara, do you have any additional feedback on like the overall Ratify experience?
I think we have a fair amount. I think we're still putting it together to some degree because we're still learning about Ratify. We chatted with Eric a bit on Friday about some of our use cases. So I think some of it stems from that. Kara, do you want to go into anything, or else I can start trying to sort through where we're at?
I know that you've been kind of taking lead at consolidating the feedback, so I trust you completely to at least kick it off.
Okay. So I think the core areas that we're looking at right now is first SBOMs and then signatures. We were hoping to have SBOM validation as part of admission control, and we're not entirely sure what that looks like yet. So we were hoping to see more along those lines. It looks like you just sort of started touching on SBOMs and just playing with them with that license checker. And I'll be the first to admit, I don't think we have a perfect picture of what SBOM validation at admission control looks like, but the license checker to me reads as something that would work really well on on a PR, right? Where you want to know, okay, I've added this package, does that impact our licensing? But it doesn't make as much sense in admission control, where if you're running into licensing issues in admission control when you've already built and released your image and set that out into the world, it's probably a little late, right? So that's one area that we are hoping to see more, or we'll potentially do some work ourselves. And then signature validation is also on our roadmap. So that was going to be the next area we ran into. And it looks like that's sort of your prioritized story, but also that there's still some bugs to work through there. And then besides those specific areas of validation, the other huge thing that we've been running into is in an AKS environment, Ratify isn't the most well suited to AKS at the moment, with the way that like all the config is packed into config.json. And if you change that, you need to restart the pod, or scale down and scale back up your deployment or something in order to have it take effect. We talked briefly with Eric about the idea of having like CRDs and a more AKS or Kubernetes friendly Ratify, but I have no idea how that fits in with your plans. We actually were hoping to chat a bit more with all y'all about the use cases of Ratify in AKS versus CI/CD or locally, and how those all fit together. Does that give you something to work off of at least?
Do you mind if I go, or?
Go ahead, Sajay.
Right. So couple of quick questions. I saw that Yomi also joined the call, and just wanted to make sure to say hi. And is Yomi also from the same team? Right.
Yep. The three of us are working together at the moment. Yeah.
Hello. And the other second part was the license checker was an example of an entry point to show you that how you can extend it to different artifact types. And yes, it is for CI/CD primarily, because I believe Nathan did the work to enable this as a GitHub action, so you can actually run Ratify as a GitHub action as well. So both models exist. From a priority perspective, you're absolutely right. We're going after signatures because we want to land that somehow where customers can block a deployment if the signature is not valid or doesn't honor a trust store configuration policy as well. Regarding the AKS, you're already talking to the right person. Eric is actually in design discussions with enabling Azure policy for Ratify, but that's more like an internal Microsoft, extensibility kind of a discussion, right? But if there are asks on that side of the fence, we want to probably like bring it in here without kind of like modifying or kind of like having too much of a cloud provider specific extensibility. So both conversations are happening, but they're independently happening. Because we might do something that's a little bit more strategic for AKS, because there is the add-on extensibility that we're looking at. I don't know, does that roughly answer?
A little bit. So we did chat with Eric a little bit about the path to a potential managed add-on and that being something in the future. But I was also just thinking about being more Kubernetes friendly in general. So things like having a lot of those configuration objects be CRDs that are watched for, and then your processes update as they see the CRDs update and such like that. Because the config.json at the moment in Kubernetes is really, really clunky to work with, especially with a Helm install where you get very little configurability over it. And a model more like Gatekeeper, where you have your policies that you set out as CRDs that are much more fully configurable on your end, would probably be a lot more Kubernetes friendly in general. But also tying the whole thing to CRDs obviously doesn't work for local or CI/CD use cases. So we weren't really sure whether that was sort of a design direction that y'all would be seriously considering, or if it's not going to work. Or we also just to be sort of clear on this, we have probably a few weeks worth of dev work that we can just put towards Ratify and helping get this moving faster and helping it meet our intent scenarios. But obviously we want to align with y'all on this and make sure that everything meets up pretty well, rather than just forking it and going off on our own, right?
Maybe I can be a little more crisp. Definitely open to kind of like making sure others can work on it. So if there's a scenario that you folks really want to get done, and I don't think it doesn't align, because we've had the conversation multiple times about kind of exposing the configuration, and there is an issue to kind of like solve this also. It's just something that, given Eric, Susan, and Akash who are kind of working on it and rotating around this, we just didn't have enough bandwidth. But I don't think there's any issue with us kind of like making the direction and if you have people that who want to solve this problem, we're more than happy to kind of make it through. And that's one of the reasons why I have support from multiple people to kind of get everybody on this and get the contributions going. So feel free to we can do a follow-up if needed, and then have like write down what we want to achieve. Like if you want to expose certain config options and kind of like take that in a pure Kubernetes route, make maybe short-term wins, and then but kind of tackle the tech debt as we keep going if needed.
Yeah, I'm
For
happy
sure.
to. I was just gonna say I'm happy to chat more, and we can make sure that we have stuff blocked out and let people go forward, in tandem. So.
And just to clarify the direction of the project, Sajay, so currently all our example work with Gatekeeper with the policy constraint, but we also have a goal to integrate with other tools and work outside of Gatekeeper. Is that still true?
So I have committed to Cal from on the side to make sure that Ratify can maybe run even inside Containerd at some point in time. So if they want to do actually process level, validation of the signature in some way, we should just be able to run the same config story directly as a Containerd plugin or something like that in that model. So yes, there is a goal or at least a vision to support Ratify running in different platforms and in different entry points as needed. Kubernetes is one entry point. That's also why I wanted to make sure we had a GitHub action that kind of shows that the project is aligned with depending on where you run, and there might not be context that Kubernetes has when you run in a CI/CD environment. So those are key things that we want to keep in mind of. So if you kind of heavy lift all the object models to Kubernetes object models, then it's going to be hard to kind of like backport it into different environments. But having a Kubernetes friendly API, like basically a shim like Cryo, might be an easier model to kind of like talk to Ratify.
Yeah, we were talking about sort of the OPA versus Gatekeeper model, where OPA is the generic, can be used in a lot of environments. Gatekeeper is very much more Kubernetes specific and adds that shim to make it really friendly to CRDs and other Kubernetes local customizations. When you're saying running without Gatekeeper, do you mean Ratify as admission control in Kubernetes?
We have toyed with the idea, but I think we just wanted to take dependency on Gatekeeper. Two reasons. One is it has a pretty strong community and it has a good experience and people already know. So we don't want to invent yet another way to kind of do admission controlling inside Kubernetes. This was something we discussed with the Gatekeeper team, and they're happy to kind of like support us. And so the other scenario is when you're running non-Kubernetes, like in a GitHub action or in a pipeline or any build environment, or even in Containerd raw. How do you kind of do these extensibilities? So these are the scenarios. We're not planning to kind of diverge from Gatekeeper at this point. At least I don't have enough investment or engineers to kind of go and tackle that problem. It's a big one.
We also have a YouTube video on the GitHub demo that Nathan did. Lee, if you're interested, I can send that link to you.
Yeah, I don't know that any of us have seen that. We've been running through a lot of the docs, but I don't remember seeing a video around. So that might be.
Yeah, so we upload our community meeting to YouTube, and there is a playlist. You can, I just tabbed to the weekly meeting notes. At the end of the notes for the week, we always have a recording link. So you can have a look at the playlist when you get a chance.
I think we actually, Kara, did we have questions about this specific policy execution using OPA item? Because I know you were looking at that since it's on the screen right now.
Oh, yeah, so that was it was actually about the pass-through, because Eric had mentioned that pass-through had come along in your conversation. And I just wanted to, I couldn't tell based off this note, like where the decision, whether that was going to come to fruition or if there were other ways to approach more of that handling of escalation of information into the at the policy level for AKM, for Kubernetes at least.
I have an agenda item today where I was going to show a proof of concept for how this information makes it to Gatekeeper, if that would help.
Yes, that would definitely help. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, we'll get to that very quickly. I just had a item just to discuss the end-to-end test validation. So with Dependabot configured, we want to have like it'll be nice to have an end-to-end test that would just show us the result that, hey, this version got bumped and the basic scenario passed. So Certec pointed us to the Gatekeeper end-to-end and how they had like a dummy provider in their scenario. It looks pretty intuitive to me. So they set up it runs as a GitHub workflow on Ubuntu, and I think it was a kind cluster that they install, and then they apply their constraint. I just want to check with everyone, like, is that the path that we want to go down as well for our end-to-end validation? Does that sound appropriate?
That sounds reasonable to me. If we wanted to have end-to-end, we would have to also have a registry running. So we'll have to make sure that that works out as well. That, from inside, because I assume they run it in a container. So we'd have like a kind cluster running, and then we'd have our registry running, and then we'd have it all talking to each other. So assuming that's possible, I think that would be really good, because that's one of the that would be an easy win.
Eric, just to clarify on the container, so is the container for pulling the artifact from, like the image and the artifact?
Yeah, so we would run the fork of distribution. There's a container that's a fork of distribution that we run, that's the registry, and we would have to push some stuff to it. And then we would start up Ratify and issue, or inside of a cluster, and then we would issue a create for something that would go look up all those artifacts.
Mm-hmm. And why can't we use a ACR registry, like a public one?
I mean, potentially you could. It's just more plumbing. So like we could have more than one. For example, you could have an end-to-end suite where you have one that uses just the local distribution. That would be quick turnover. And then, you could have ones that depend on external registry. You just have to then manage credentials for that registry and plumbing them to every job, making sure that, permissions on things running those end-to-end tests so that we don't expose the credentials to forks of the project and things like that. So it's not doable. There's just a handful of hoops we have to jump through.
Do we want to make sure that somebody who's cloning the repository can run the end-to-end without dependency on some external resource?
Yeah, that would be my biggest concern is, if for whatever reason, if we garbage collect the registry, if we just put it somewhere and we accidentally garbage collect it, we're going to take down a bunch of validation. So my preference would be that we don't depend on external. But if at some point it made sense, then it wouldn't be that hard to add.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'll look into that. Yeah, that's all the question I have around this one. Eric, you want to talk about the verify results extension?
Sure. So if you can click this. So this is just a diff. So there are three things. I started talking about it at the beginning a little bit, but there's three things that this change does. One, it adds the pass-through execution mode, so that regardless of whether a verifier passes or fails, the executor will always run through all the possible verifiers for all the artifacts that it can, and it will collect up all the results. And then the second change you can see here for the handlers is rather than making an external data item where the subject, the key is the subject, and then the value is just a string, I took the entire result and I appended it as the value, because that value is just an empty interface. So it can technically be whatever we want, and it will get serialized and passed back to the Rego that's calling the external data provider. And then the next thing I did, you can scroll down a little bit. Some of these are just string changes that had to be made because I changed so here, that verifier API. So rather than having an array of strings for results, I changed this to have one message field that the verifier can pass whatever message it needs to. And then I added an extensions field so that if a verifier had additional metadata that it wanted to provide, then it can provide that via a map in the extensions field. And so this would allow verifiers to add additional structured information that they might have. And the other thing that it will do is allow verifiers to actually define the structure of the data that they're going to put into the extension. So somebody who wanted to write a policy could go look at a verifier's, like a Notary v2 extensions struct to know what they would be getting from that verifier. And then if you scroll down here, I think for here, you can see here, all I've done is, as a sample, I've taken the Notary v2 verifier and I have looked at the certificate that is being used to validate the artifact, and I've added as an extension the organization and the common name. So when this ends up getting back to Gatekeeper, this ends up looking like the full structure of verifier results that we have, where you have the name of every verifier, you have the Boolean for its success, the message, and then the extensions, which in this case for Notary contains these two values. So this could be extended to include, a number of values for whatever verifier. And then at the Rego level, this would empower you to write more interesting constraint templates. Like we could have a constraint template for this to say, for a particular namespace, there must be a valid signature that comes from a cert with a particular organization. And then so that could be the constraint template. And then the constraint itself, people would just need to pass the namespace and the organization, and they would get all the rest of this enforcement for free. So anyway, so that's the idea. It didn't take too long. So this is just a proof of concept that I put together to kind of get some feedback or some thoughts.
I had a question just to make sure I'm clear. The Rego that would go in the constraint would get the extension field back, and then the constraint template that's based off of the constraint would be able to just pass in a set of parameters of what has to be there in order for this thing to match up to it, or to even verify it.
Yeah, so Susan, if you scroll back up to that struct, so for every single subject that is passed into Ratify to do validation, you will get an array of these structures. So that, with the name telling you the verifier, a message, and all of the extensions and success. So you would get this struct to play with times X number of verifiers and artifacts in the results within Gatekeeper.
Okay, cool, thanks.
And I can show you as an example what that looks like if I can borrow the screen.
I'm gonna make you the host, Eric.
Okay.
Which Rego are we talking? We can write some policies on these extensions. Is it
Yes.
the Gatekeeper, or is it within the OPA policy engine of Ratify itself? Where are we?
So with pass-through, with pass-through, this would be directly in Gatekeeper. So the idea was this would be the fastest way to get more complex policy, with the idea being we would be able to do something very similar through integration of OPA in a non-pass-through mode. But that's the today that was the idea. The pass-through would just come from let's see. So can people see this?
Yep.
Okay. So, and I don't know if there's a way for me to make this bigger. Okay, there we go. So here you can see, you know, just calling ratify, verify, just like we would if we were a gatekeeper. You would get back this response where the items are the key being the container or the subject that you are interested in, and the value being the entire response. So here, for every verifier, the is success in pass-through mode, I just set to be true always. That I guess we can decide on what that would look like. But here, you can see here's the SBOM verifier, and it's successful. You can see here the notary v2 one, and these are those extensions that I provided, or that we added to the implementation. So this is all just JSON that you could write Rego to say there must be a notary v2 verifier with a successful validation with this in its extensions, and then, you know, cosign verifier. So this is what it would look like when it gets back to Gatekeeper. Instead of today, we just have key is this, and then value is a copy of this plus underscore invalid or valid. So this gives you a little more latitude at Gatekeeper. So that's what I got for that.
Does the that sort of top level is success field, does that have to be there? Because to me at least, that doesn't make a lot of sense to be declaring success in a pass-through mode.
Yeah, so that's there due to the interface. So
it does have to be there. Okay.
Yeah, it's part of the struct that we use to hold this data. So it's like we could say in a non-pass-through mode, we would ditch, you know, some amount of this. Like we could just leave verifier reports empty, and then you would just have this value. So that assumes all the policy is happening at the ratify level, and you're just passing one value back for, you know, the entire request. So here I'll give the screen back to Susan. Let's see, make host. So anyways, that's you know, kind of the proof of concept change that I had in mind. And anyone who has, you know, comments about it or you know, other ideas, it would be great to hear. But I think that this would allow us some good flexibility to let verifiers give more information that would be interesting for policy.
Sajay, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I think the fact of returning more data definitely does sound appealing. I'm hoping that we don't forget that we should be able to write this policy outside of Gatekeeper also. So in the end, my hope is that we can actually support full OPA flexibility inside Ratify directly, where if you run it as a CLI, you should be able to verify it without having to run it fully in Kubernetes. So both models does make sense because you're just providing more data right in the end, and you can compose in Gatekeeper directly, and people who are comfortable just composing in Gatekeeper get that opportunity. Because there's a scenario where we have a lot of signatures and you might have a lot of subject names, and composing that would be really complex. And in Notary, the trust policy that has just got merged in, there is a way in which you can say this image needs a signature from this specific subject name. And so that entire configuration might be scoped down to the specific signature itself. And it would be hard to kind of like write that in Gatekeeper because you need the search, you need a bunch of things that need to be mounted that only Ratify knows. So it would be good to think about both. But I think it gives you the quick win of being able to say, I want a signature and I want an SBOM or something like that, right? All right, cool.
Right, yeah.
Pass through, it will just go through all the artifacts and all verifiers, right? There is nothing like you short circuit or like any and all that kind of logic is taken out, correct, Eric?
Right. It's still there, but it's kind of ignored. It's like either do this, or if pass through is true, then don't do that.
Yes. And also the latency requirements, I think currently we don't have that issue. The Gatekeeper, at least.
Yeah, I think we got the go ahead to bump that back up because the original reason for that having to be lower is a non-issue for newer versions of Kubernetes. So
what can we bump it to?
7.
I think we're 7? At 7 right now. Yeah, by default.
Well, that's better than 3.
Yeah, it's much better. But I guess TBD for the number of round trips. If people sign their stuff with 6,000 signatures, I guess we'll see. But
my hope is that we get to 1 and people actually can watch something, and then we can think about multiple. But there is a concern around 7 getting closer to the limit of 10. I don't know which conversation this was in. So either way, just let's be conservative on the time that is taken here. In the long run, it's just going to keep increasing, right? As we all know, number of signature additions are going to keep increasing. If people sign daily, scan results are also going to be increasing as well.
Just as a note, I did follow up with Sertac. He also thinking along the same lines, like both options are valid, the pass-through option and the supporting the policy execution, and they're not necessarily exclusive, and just different user scenarios. And also with the other, we have like a provider timeout that we currently configure to 100. We probably need to lower that to 7 to match the webhook timeout. So I'll send a PR for that. And that's all on our agenda. I see Scott joined. Hello, Scott. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, I work with Eric for AKS Underlay, and I work with Sajay. He's my boss, or my boss's boss, or somewhere in that whole hierarchy. Yeah, I was just looking to maybe contribute. I've been studying the code a little bit, so looking forward to becoming a part of the team.
Welcome.
All right, thank you.
I wanted to probably ask Susan something. It's hard to kind of figure out whether we need to cancel the meeting or not and then communicate because we don't have a Slack channel. We decided not to have a Slack channel primarily because moving people from one Slack once we donated and things like that will be hard. Is it okay to maybe use the Hack Doc as a way to kind of communicate, okay, maybe this week it's there or not there, and just use that as a model to at least give a heads up if there is anything that if the call does get dropped. I don't see that happening, but you never know when people cannot make it, right? So would it be fine if we maybe made a small update to the README saying that for meeting details, look here, and then that way people know that the call is on or not or anything like that. Does that sound reasonable?
Yeah, I can do that. I wonder if I can also cancel specific instances of the meeting on Google Calendar, if you'll get an update.
Okay, I don't know, but
okay, well, I can do both.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
That's just administrator. Thank you.
Anything else that anyone want to talk about? We still have 10 minutes, or we can end the meeting early.
I'll just throw out a quick question to y'all, since I think we're gonna try to do some work on this. Are there specific areas that would be the most help for you all in moving Ratify forward for us to contribute to? I think we need to do some prioritizing on our end and sort of figure out what fits with our scenario. But if there's specific things that would be like the biggest lift for Ratify, or specific areas that you want us focused on, that would definitely be part of our prioritizing. So.
Previously, yeah, go ahead, Sajay.
No, I mean, go ahead, you started.
No, I was gonna say that previously we talked about prioritization. We said, like RC1, we want to get the specification to the RC1 release, and then we said to support the policy execution. And then the third one was the being able to dynamically update the configuration. Does that sound right to you, Sajay? Yeah,
I mean, it's the same list. I don't think there's any change to that. I think dynamic configuration of the policy without having to restart the pod was one of the P0s that we wanted to do. I think
something on our minds as well.
Okay, cool. So I think that is what everybody wants, right? You don't want to have to restart the pod to just apply a small change to the general configuration. And how that is solved, I think you brought up a couple of points, like if you're doing it through CRDs or if you're doing it through config map, whatever, however that model is, I think you can have a chat with Eric and folks and who know the guts of this to kind of make a decision. I think the other one was supporting a little bit more richer configuration, right? I want to require an SBOM and I want to have a signature on the SBOM and those kind of things, which the initial pitch that Eric was going with is, correct me if I'm wrong, which is give Ratify an ability to stick a policy directly, like a Rego expression directly in it, and don't have structured policy or anything like that. So we don't have to make special properties or anything on that, but rather if you can have the open engine directly embedded into Ratify. So that way you can write a Rego expression that can look through the whole outputs rather than having any special casing of types of policies. Because right now, I think we're looking at some policies like code-based policies, like any or all. Instead of that, just delegate the whole thing over to OPA. So it's a little bit more of a learning curve, but the framework supports richer configuration from underneath. Does that make sense?
I think so.
Eric,
you want to add to that to maybe clarify?
Yeah. So I can provide a link. But the idea of that Gatekeeper has of having constraints and constraint templates was very interesting, and it turns out that is all implemented through a frameworks library that they have that you can integrate directly into other Go projects. And so that was something that I started looking into being able to leverage, so that because our model will probably look quite similar to that, in that we will have certain, a grab bag of policies that people are probably interested in, like particular SBOM fields being there, or signatures from particular certificates being there. And so if we have some number of those that we can let people just bring their, through CRD, just bring name of policy, place to apply, or sorry, not through CRD, through config for local or for CI/CD. If we had those embeddable templates that we could put into Ratify directly, then we would support all of those use cases directly through Ratify.
So just sorry to clarify, if you want to be able to run Rego or OPA-based policy constraints, regardless of whether you're in Kubernetes or running in a CI/CD pipeline. So it's awesome. Okay, just wanted to say that back again to make sure that I was understanding.
Yeah, so I shared the library. There's a link to it there, but that's essentially that whole constraint and constraint template thing that you see through Gatekeeper. That's it. And so the idea was for us to integrate that library into Ratify directly.
So then the way the constraint templates work now is that it basically abstracts away some of the complexity and gives it a very coarse-grained interface to the folks who want to apply where these Regos run that are in the constraints. So that's what you're looking to do to basically, I guess, surface that coarse-grained configuration to the config, while the Rego itself would remain less touched, maybe not as modified as much.
Yeah, I would probably say, at least for the scenarios that I'm thinking of, it would, I would hope that we could hit a large majority of potential scenarios with Rego that we provide. Since, I don't, maybe I'm wrong here, but I would assume that people might not be familiar with Rego, or maybe they don't want to be familiar with Rego.
That's an understatement. That's an understatement.
Yeah. So, if we can accomplish a large portion with Rego that we provide out of the box, I think that will be a huge win. And the people who don't like our Rego anyways probably know enough about Rego to fix it on their own.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. Yeah. Okay.
That would be my vision.
Eric, can we reach out and get back in touch with you then, probably sometime this week, and talk more about where we can contribute? It sounds like,
totally,
especially in the AKS area, you're the main one to contact.
Yeah, I work pretty close to the AKS group. Yeah.
Cool. And if you have any item to discuss next week, just please add it to the agenda. Anyone can edit. Yep. Thanks everyone. I'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Cool. Thanks all.
Yes.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good to meet y'all.
Thanks.
Good to see a large crowd. Take care.